The night sky. A vast expanse of shimmering stars stretched endlessly above, casting a pale, mystical glow on the serpentine path below. The serpentine steps, an ancient staircase, wound upward in a graceful spiral, disappearing into the unknown horizon. Each step was carved from pristine white stone, smooth yet powerful, jutting out from the earth like the teeth of a forgotten giant. The air was alive with a subtle vibrating energy, as if the cosmos itself whispered secrets that only the initiated could hear. Two figures ascended this celestial path, their footsteps almost soundless, yet reverberating with purpose. Taisea, a young dreamer and warrior, moved with quiet determination. His dark hair fell loosely around his face, framing eyes that gleamed with the intensity of one seeking deeper truths. His jawline was sharp and his brow furrowed slightly, as if his mind constantly weighed the gravity of their journey. He wore a simple yet elegant robe the color of midnight, which flowed around him with each step. The hilt of his bokken rested at his side, a wooden practice sword imbued with chaotic energy that responded to his will. Beside him, Buo, a mysterious light brown owl with an aura of mischief and wisdom, walked with an easy grace. His face was narrowly framed, and his sharp eyes gleamed with amusement and hidden knowledge. A slight smirk constantly tugged at his beak, and he whistled softly as they walked, a low, haunting tune that seemed to echo through the night. His robes were a patchwork of earth tones that blended with the surreal landscape, and he carried a walking staff, though he leaned on it more out of habit than necessity. The serpentine path twisted ahead, lit by rows of checkered candles. Their flames flickered in the cool night breeze, casting long, dancing shadows that seemed to stretch and reach out, whispering forgotten stories. The stars above shone brighter here, their light lending a sense of otherworldliness to the journey. Taisea's gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where the steps vanished into the night. "We reveal a new level," Taisea said, his voice steady but thoughtful, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to grasp the meaning behind his words. Buo's lips curled into a smile, his tone playful yet grounded. "Yes, we have," he replied, whistling a soft note that lingered in the air. "But who am I to judge or say?" Taisea's brow furrowed further as doubt flickered across his face. "There must be a reason," he murmured, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. Buo tilted his head, his eyes sparkling with mischief. "Do you have the rhythm?" he asked, as if the answer was as simple as following the beat of a song. "Something." Taisea trailed off, struggling for the right words, his mind caught in an elusive thought. At that moment, a glimmering bubble floated past them, catching the starlight. Inside, a crow's skull twirled slowly, emanating an eerie glow, casting faint shadows on the steps. "What is it?" Taisea whispered, watching the strange bubble drift by. "I don't understand yet. What do you think?" Buo chuckled softly, his eyes twinkling. "Keep stepping up the serpentine steps," he said, his whistle filling the silence once more. His tune carried a strange resonance, full of mystery, echoing through the cosmic air. Taisea nodded as if shaking off the weight of his thoughts. "Right." Buo's expression shifted, becoming more serious, though the playfulness never fully left his eyes. "This is our fable," he said, his voice steady. "The path is the test." Taisea smiled faintly, his resolve returning. "Together then," he said, nodding at Buo. "Together then," Buo echoed, returning the nod before resuming his low, haunting whistle. The path twisted and curved as they continued their ascent. Each step seemed to pulse with an ancient rhythm, the energy of the place palpable in the cool night air. As they passed a towering monument, the form of a stone snake loomed above them. Its eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence, and its wide grin hinted at untold power, silent and watchful. The monument exuded a sense of reverence and danger, as if it had witnessed countless secrets unfold over aeons. Buo reached out and touched the stone gently, his voice soft with awe. "It holds so much power," he murmured. "The space, the energy you put in." Taisea turned to Buo, his voice low but intense. "Are you thinking what I'm thinking?" Buo grinned, his playful smirk returning. "An hour of ambience? A collection of realms, each a volumetric stare?" Taisea's excitement grew as the possibilities unfolded before him. "Then let's do it." They walked on, approaching a gate glowing with ethereal blue light. Hexagram-shaped columns rose from the ground like sentinels, their surfaces adorned with serpentine boots, their red eyes watching the duo with unsettling intensity. The presence of these figures added an otherworldly gravity to the moment, as if the steps themselves were being judged by ancient forces. Taisea's gaze remained fixed ahead, his tone now heavy with purpose. "My dreams will not rest," he said quietly. "The pain they teach, that's what will push me to be the best." Buo's voice softened, almost melancholic. "The path is the test." Taisea nodded slowly, his confidence growing with each step. The paths are all a test. His eyes fell on a calligraphy fragment etched into a nearby stone. He paused, reading the words aloud. Cloth. One game, one mind, one dream. The stars above twinkled in time with his words, as if acknowledging the weight of his thoughts. Taisea's gaze dropped to the ground beneath his feet. There are fall leaves, and then there are none. A sudden gust of wind swept through the landscape, carrying the last of the autumn leaves into the sky. Silence followed, and Taisea could sense the subtle shift of the seasons in the air. The seasons change, he said softly, a faint smile on his lips, and the boss becomes the mob. The fall of power, only in void vision. As they passed through the blue gate, the landscape opened up before them. Rolling hills stretched into the distance, dotted with patches of grass and white blocks forming a winding path. Small blue rodents scurried across the rocks, their tiny feet barely making a sound. Taisea drew his bouquin in a swift practice motion. The wooden sword gleamed in the faint starlight, its surface reflecting the mysterious energy of the place. With a flick of his wrist, the blade cut through the air, leaving a red tracer in its wake. The red line shimmered, transforming into butterfly wings that fluttered briefly before dissolving into the wind. Chaos churns under the pressure of foresight, Taisea said, his voice filled with quiet intensity. Buo's tone turned urgent, a sense of purpose filling the air. Taisea, now, we must couple purpose. Taisea's gaze sharpened, his resolve unshakable. It's the only way. Buo nodded, his eyes wide with realization. We have to play the game. Taisea's brow raised in curiosity. You're saying? Yes, Buo replied, his voice filled with awe. That was only the first iteration. You know how powerful the stories of the ancients were. Taisea's voice grew softer, as if speaking more to himself than to Buo, more powerful than I could ever imagine. As if responding to his thoughts, Taisea's tail flicked, brushing aside some dirt on the path. From the spot where his tail touched, a large plant suddenly sprouted, its leaves unfurling with a soft hum, sending a delicate melody into the air. The plant's presence seemed to shift the energy around them, light and beautiful, as if it too was part of the journey's purpose. That is the lesson, Buo whispered in awe, his eyes wide with wonder. Taisea smiled, the dawning of understanding lighting his features. Platinum iteration, the writtens carved their earthen mark. His voice steadied with conviction. Done right, the spell can alter the entire track. The air around them shimmered, reality itself bending to their will. Taisea's voice carried the weight of knowledge as he continued. That's the intention needed to release, what is formed in casting curiosity to the mesh. He paused, his gaze shifting upwards, sent into the flow, forever lasting. A silent ping, he whispered, chaos, rippling into eternity. Buo nodded, his voice filled with intensity. The tongue will eliminate any cultivation of the weak. Taisea's eyes gleamed, his purpose clearer than ever. Our purpose is even greater than we thought. His voice rose, an incantation spoken to the vast sky above, an iron bullet into the ocean drop. As his words hung in the air, the stars above began to swirl in slow, methodical patterns, as if in response to the unfolding reality. Archimedes' mutative dial, Taisea said, his voice filled with finality. The clock signals that it's time to level up. The two continued walking, their steps quiet but purposeful. The wind carried their words into the vast open night, their voices mingling with the hum of the cosmos. The path stretched endlessly before them, twisting through the hills and over the white stones that glowed softly beneath the starlight. Each step felt like a new chapter, a deeper dive into the mystery that had drawn them to this place, but now with a growing clarity about their mission. Buo's whistle echoed again, softer now, a playful tune, but with an undercurrent of something more serious. He glanced at Taisea, his expression one of both amusement and caution. You know, he began, his voice barely rising above the sound of the wind, this path was never really about where we are going. Taisea glanced at him, eyebrows raised in question, but said nothing, allowing Buo to continue. Buo tapped his staff lightly against the ground, the sound almost swallowed by the quiet. It's about what we learn on the way. Every step, every twist, every shadow, it's all shaping us. Taisea looked forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. Shaping us for what exactly? His voice carried a weight now, as if he had long considered this question but never dared ask. Buo smiled, though this time it lacked his usual playfulness. For whatever comes next. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds being the soft crackle of the candle flames lining the path and the faint rustle of the grass beneath their feet. The landscape around them shifted subtly, the rolling hills becoming more jagged, the white blocks beneath them more irregular, as if they were nearing the edge of some unseen boundary. Taisea's hand rested on the hilt of his bouquin, his fingers absent-mindedly tracing the intricate carvings in the wood. His mind churned with thoughts, fragments of the journey coming together in ways he hadn't considered before. Ahead, the path narrowed, leading them towards a massive stone archway. The arch was carved with ancient symbols, glowing faintly with an inner light, their meaning lost to time. The stones around the arch seemed to pulse with life, a heartbeat echoing from the very earth itself. Buo's eyes widened as they approached. "Now, this is interesting," he said, his voice barely containing his excitement. "I've heard of places like this, but never thought we'd stumble across one." Taisea frowned slightly, his eyes scanning the arch and the surrounding area. "What is it?" "A convergence," Buo said, stepping closer to the arch. "A place where realities meet. It's rare to find one intact. They usually collapse under their own complexity." As they stood before the arch, the air around them seemed to thicken, vibrating with a strange energy that made the hairs on the back of Taisea's neck stand on end. The symbols on the arch began to glow brighter, pulsating in time with the rhythm of the earth beneath them. Taisea hesitated, his hand gripping his bokken more tightly. "What happens when we cross it?" Buo chuckled, though the sound was more nervous than amused. "Oh, who knows? We could end up anywhere. Or any-when." Taisea glanced at Buo, then back at the arch. "But we're going through, aren't we?" Buo gave him a sidelong glance, his eyes twinkling with mischief again. "Of course we are." Without another word, Taisea stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. As he crossed the threshold of the arch, the world around him seemed to warp and twist, the landscape bending and shifting in impossible ways. The air crackled with energy, and for a moment, everything was a blur of light and sound. When the world finally righted itself, Taisea found himself standing in a place that defied all logic. The sky above was no longer the familiar night sky, but a swirling mass of colors and shapes, constantly shifting and changing. The ground beneath his feet was a strange metallic surface, smooth and reflective, stretching out in all directions. Massive gears and cogs as tall as buildings turned slowly in the distance, their movements deliberate and precise. The air was thick with the sound of grinding metal and the hum of unseen machinery. Buo appeared beside him, his eyes wide with wonder. "Well, this is different," he said, his voice trailing off as he took in the strange new world around them. Taisea nodded, his hand still on the hilt of his bokken. "Where are we?" Buo shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "Another level, another layer of the fable. Hard to say exactly, but it seems like we're in some kind of machine." They began to walk again, their footsteps echoing on the metallic surface beneath them. The air here was colder, sharper, the constant whirring and clicking of the machinery creating an almost oppressive atmosphere. As they walked, Taisea's mind raced with possibilities. The convergence had brought them here for a reason. Of that he was sure, but what the reason was, he couldn't yet see. Ahead of them, a massive cog turned slowly, revealing a pathway beneath its teeth. The path led to a platform suspended high above the ground, connected to the gears by a series of thin metal bridges. Taisea and Buo exchanged a glance, then made their way toward it. The climb was steep, the metal bridges swaying slightly under their weight, but Taisea's steps were sure, his resolve unshaken. Buo followed closely behind, his staff tapping lightly against the metal with each step. When they reached the platform, they found it empty, save for a single pedestal in the center. On the pedestal sat a small, intricately carved box, glowing faintly with the same inner light as the symbols on the archway. Taisea approached the box cautiously, his hand hovering over it for a moment before he picked it up. It was surprisingly light, and the carvings on its surface were intricate, almost hypnotic. As he turned it over in his hands, the box began to hum softly, the carvings glowing brighter. Buo stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the box. "Careful," he said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "Things like that, they usually come with a cost." Taisea nodded, his gaze never leaving the box. "I know." With a deep breath, he opened the box. The moment the lid lifted, a wave of energy burst forth, radiating outward in all directions. The air around them crackled with power, and the platform beneath their feet shook as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Taisea stumbled back, his hand instinctively going to his bokken, but before he could react, the energy from the box coalesced into a single point, forming a glowing orb that hovered just above the pedestal. The orb pulsed with a strange, otherworldly light, casting long shadows across the platform. For a moment, everything was still, the only sound the soft hum of the orb. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, the orb shot into the sky, disappearing into the swirling mass of colors above. Taisea and Buo stood in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the spot where the orb had vanished. "What just happened?" Taisea asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Buo shook his head slowly, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. I don't know, but I think we just set something in motion. Taisea stared at the sky for a long moment, his mind racing. Whatever they had just unleashed, it was beyond anything he had ever encountered before, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. He turned to Buo, his voice steady but filled with determination. We have to follow it. Buo nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. Of course we do. With that they turned and began their descent, the path ahead of them uncertain, but their purpose clearer than ever. The fable had shifted once again, and the next chapter awaited them.